Welcome. Hello, everyone. Welcome to It's Not a Formula, It's a Conversation, Creating an Authentic Resume, the second webinar in the Professional Power Up series by Headhunter on Tap. Professional Power Up is a comprehensive career development series that'll get you charged up to power through your job search or career transition. Michelle's posting the link where you can find all of the upcoming events and videos from past events in this series during the month of March. Complete with 4 interactive webinars, 4 support Ask Us Anything sessions, and personal access to our career experts, this series provides actionable skills, not just more information. My name is Becky Picone, and I'll be your host for today. I work in alumni relations and constituent engagement with Michelle Cavalcanti, who is helping with program logistics. Before we begin, I will just quickly remind you of a few things. Please keep your microphones on mute so that we're all able to hear the presentation. And as you can see, we have interpretation today. Welcome, Amanda. We're so happy to have you with us again. We also have the captioning that you can turn on by going to your navigation bar. If you're having any technical issues, please message my colleague, Michelle Cavalcanti, privately, and she can assist you. If you do have any questions for Barbara and Jay, please send them to me, Becky Picone, in a private chat, and I'll ask the questions for you during the question and answer period. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can. We are recording this session and we'll be sharing it with you and all those who registered who were not able to attend live. So if there are any other programs you're interested in but cannot attend, please do register anyway so that you can receive the videos. And thank you for being here. We hope you enjoy the program. Now I'd like to introduce Barbara Grossman and Jay Berger, the amazing duo who make up Headhunter on Tap. Barbara and Jay are the co-founders of Paradigm Partners. They have spent the last 30 years in executive recruiting and career services. Together, they bring a practical, real-world approach to career development services and resume writing. Their approach is informed by their experiences as executive recruiters. Barbara and Jay are part of the Alumni Life and Career Coaches program. They've been generously providing complimentary advice and guidance for our University of Rochester community on the first Friday of most months for almost 2 years now in the Job Talk series. They've already helped so many alumni and other community members with creating new dynamic resumes, transitioning industries, finding a new career path, preparing for an interview, and assessing how to get to the next point in their career. They're very passionate about helping alumni and students with finding new opportunities by sharing their expertise, knowledge, and experience. Welcome, Barbara and Jay. We're so happy to have you with us again. I'll turn it over to you now for your presentation, and I will be back later for the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thanks, Becky. And wow, week 2. Welcome back to those of you who were here last week, and welcome to those of you who were just joining us for the first time. Today is pretty chock full, and we're going to try to leave time for questions and answers at the end. So we're going to go pretty quickly through the presentation, and remember that there is the session on Friday, the Job Talk on Friday for questions. You'll have the recording to review. And of course, you can always reach out to us through email if there are any specific questions. Jay's going to take you through first the overall concept that we use when we approach resume writing, and then I'll go through more of the blocking and tackling of resume writing. And then he'll come back on and wrap up before we take questions for the day. One comment I just want to make, someone commented to me about this after our last week's session. Some people don't. What? Who knows us? Someone who knows us. And you might want to mention that you're married because your relationship seems a little comfortable. So yes, indeed, we are married, different last names, but we've been married for a long time.
A long time.
Anyway, Jay, do you want to dive in? Because I know we have a lot.
Yeah. And Becky, I prefer to call this a conversation than a presentation. And so that's just, I'm more comfortable with that. And part of what we came up with Headhunter on Tap was to have the Job Talk session or the Ask Me, the questions afterwards, so we can personalize some of the information that we pass along. So it's not just out there in the unit. There's an awful lot of information out there. The problem is, how does it apply to you? And one of the reasons we wanted the Job Talk mixed in, we had a great Job Talk on Friday. I'm sure you'll agree. People were asking great questions. They were giving back and forth, coming on camera with us. And we did a back and forth. And I think people gained a lot of information or insight from other people's questions. Yeah. So Friday, we will follow up to any questions that we can't get to today. I'm going to try to get us in here now. This is mine. what happened? There we go. And then we want to go here. Like that. There we go. Right? That's working, Becky, right?
Yep, it looks great.
Excellent, terrific. So it's not a formula, it's a conversation. We're going to have all of our contact information. Becky will make it available to you in a second. Let's start here. First of all, I think probably 99% of us have something in common. Barbara's the 1% who probably is not, although what I mean by that is everyone hates writing their own resume. And I guess Barbara would hate writing her own resume. She's good at writing other people's. That's something everybody has in common. It's very, very difficult sometimes to take a step back and look at yourself through a different prism and get a better, with a little bit of distance, be able to put forth the gist of what you're about, how you go about doing what you do, as well as your accomplishments along the way. And that's part of what we want to kind of cover here. I love this line, who am I anyway? Am I my resume, from a chorus line. I love musicals. The next line in this, and in theater, with your resume is a headshot. And the next line of this lyric is, who am I anyway? Am I my resume? This is a picture of a person I don't know. All right. And I think that's what a lot of people will look. They'll look at their resume and say, does this capture me, or it doesn't capture me? Or does it get the whole essence of me? That's what we're going to look at. I'm going to look at a more high level and give you some of the background of what we do. Barbara's going to look at some of the nuts and bolts of putting things together. One of the things to remember is that there's no such thing as a perfect resume. It takes a little bit of the pressure off. Beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. All right. You never know who's on the other side reading your resume. Now, you want to anticipate, you want to understand that. I mean, the three components that we say are important, and you'll hear us talk about these through the entire thing, are what do you want to convey? What do you want to convey? To whom? Who's actually reading it, and what jobs do whatever? And what do you have to work with? What are the raw materials you have to work with when you're doing that? All right. But a couple of things to remember about a resume. A resume is a marketing document. All right. It's a document that's put together to convey you accurately, authentically. And you're going to hear me say authentic about 1 million times, authentically, because when you show up, you want it to have your voice. You want to, when people see your resume and you start addressing what's in the resume, it sounds like it's you, it's coming from you, it's genuine. People pick up on that, but it is a marketing document. So you want to present yourself in the best possible light. You do want to be careful, too many people will make a resume look more like a product description. All right. Now, when you go onto Amazon, they'll talk about a product and they'll say, you know, it'll make your life better and it'll lighten up a room and make it add warmth and whatever. I just bought a lamp. That's what's making me think of a lamp. And then all of a sudden I found you go to product specs and it says, you know, D-cell batteries and it's 9 inches high and 6 inches. You know, that's not what you want your resume to read like. You want it to talk about what you're going to bring forward. And we'll get into that in a second. It's also a living document. We recommend that people have several different resumes because most people want to convey different things for different jobs. Sometimes it can be narrow, but oftentimes it's a little bit broader. And who are you communicating with? That will determine how you want to structure your resume moving forward. Different resumes doesn't mean they're radically different, but you may change the focus slightly. And in this age of word processing, that's not that difficult to do. The things we want you to walk away with today is a clear articulation of who you are and what you bring to the table. That it's important to have that when you start out to write your resume, right from a certain context. You also want it to be easy to read and understand because the person reading your resume is generally reading through hundreds of them, and you don't want them to have to work that hard to get what you want to communicate. And the last thing is, you want it to be long enough to communicate everything relevant to the reader. Like a great novel, you want it to have everything, every word must have a purpose with no extraneous words. So that's what you want to target. When I talked about authenticity, one of the things that when we We'll get to that in a second. When I talk about authenticity, we're going to talk a lot about putting you in the language. We're going to get to how you can structure that. It's not about what you have, just about what you have done. You should say it's not about what you've done. It's also how you've gone about doing it. Companies want to hire people because they hire people, not just, it's a term I'm looking for, accomplishments. They want to know what are the tasks, how you go about solving tasks, how you get things done, how you approach situations, because your situations will change. And your personal stamp is all of these kind of link up together to kind of, again, spell your resume to say, yeah, that's definitely Jay. Now, we came to this professional narrative kind of powers a lot of what we do. It's at the core of what we do. We came to this through, it was probably a couple of decades ago. I had a candidate, and before I sent the candidate in for a job, I had recruited him for a job. I was presenting him to the company. Before he went on the interview, I said, I want to read to you the profile summary I presented to the company so you know what they're expecting. And when I finished reading that profile summary to the candidate, they said, oh my God, you made me sound terrific. And I got really, really, scared. I said, did I misrepresent anything? I didn't want to misrepresent and have you, whatever, fall on your face because I'm saying things. And they said, no, you got me better than me. And in subsequent times when I would read a profile summary to people, and Barbara herself, they would say the same thing. And we realized it was something we were pulling out of our interviews that candidates themselves could not target. And what we ended up doing when we were asked by Rochester to put together a webinar about resume writing, it had us qualify and quantify what we do intuitively. And that built this formula. Personal formula, gifts, traits about yourself. Your journey is a combination of either your personal journey and professional journey. Ultimately, inform your professional narrative. It gives you a place to think from. It also will guide what types of jobs you might excel at, and not only excel at, but be happy in. All right. And what's the key to anything? Successful job search is one, being successful in the job and being happy in the job. Personal formula. I heard somebody refer to this as gifts. I kind of like that because your personal formula are those go-to things that you use in every day in your life.
Without even realizing it.
Right. They're your inherent strengths. They're the things you rely on when you interact with family, when you mow the lawn, when you're dealing with and business. And just about everywhere, all right? They are what you fall back on. And why do you fall back on them? Because they come easily to you, rather than, some people are very improvisational and some people are much more procedural. It's easy for one person to just, well, I'm the nut, so I'm the improvisational person. Barbara's the procedural person. We have different strengths. When we work with candidates, we sit down with them and we actually take them through this process. Give me a word that describes you. And we kind of talk it through to make sure it truly is something that they use ongoingly. A couple caveats here. One of the things about when you target your 5, 6 personal, formulas, traits that are strengths of yours, this is not something that you want to be aspirational, something that you aspire to, that you want to move towards. Like, I always wanted to be improvisational, so I'm going to put it there. No, it has to be a true, authentic representation. Also, there's no such thing as a bad personal formula. All right. Some people will say like procedural and dependable and methodical, and they'll look at that and say, no, I want to be improvisational and I want to be intuitive and I want to be dynamic. There is no such thing as a bad personal formula. The more authentic you are, the happier you'll be and the more successful you'll be. And with regard to procedural and dependent and methodical, when you're in an airplane, the back of an airplane, and that pilot is landing that plane, you don't want him to get improvisational and creative and say, I'm going to try to land it backwards, or I'm going to go inside. You don't want to fly into Miami rather than New York. All right. You want somebody, your gifts and strengths should lean in and help you become quite successful in what you do. Now we layer that on to, let me go back for a second. we're going to take you through the process with a candidate by the name of Jake. All right. Jake has given us permission to use his background and all that other stuff, names and dates of change to protect the innocent. But Jake is somebody who's systematic, energetic, collaborative, empathetic, analytical, very positive, and a problem solver, right? So when we get to the next step of this process, we look at his journey. And we want to see what is his journey. Now, Jake has more of not a bit. Some people will have very, very dynamic personal things, having changed, lived all around the world, maybe emigrated from one place to another, culture shifts and all that. His was a little less exotic, except there's something in here. So he graduated. He was blessed to get a lot of support. So he went through Brandeis and BU with an MBA and master's. Got hired at Marriott, experienced a lot of success, director level stuff, but had an itch. He had an entrepreneurial itch that he wanted to scratch. And he ended up leaving that to try something, a venture that after 4.5, 5 years failed. After that failed, he went back into what he knew, hospitality, right back to Marriott as a consultant, looking for a full-time job, worked for about a year, and then COVID hit. Now he's laid off. All right. Now we have personal, professional. We have a lot of stuff. He's seeking an industry change because there is no industry for him. And he came to us saying, I'm a hospitality guy. And what can I do? There are no hospitality jobs. Now we're going to get to, okay, let's do this. Let me take you through, let me see if I can, whoops. There we go.
Top share. There you go.
Thanks for bearing with me. I wanted you to get a sense of Jake. So Jake, if you look at his resume, this is what he came in with. He said, I'm a hospitality guy. This is what I'm all about. He was a director as a consultant, as I said, right? Looks fairly decent, right? Director, description of what he did. Then we got the Monkey Joe's Germantown, all right, Family Play Center. That was his entrepreneurial experience. And then we see Marriott, senior director, owner, friend, very conventional type of resume, all right, chronological resume. It looks like a fairly successful gentleman, right? Now, what we want to do here is later on, we're going to describe how we're going to go through changing this from Jake conventional resume to one that expresses more of his personal formula. And now let me see if I can get back
to share.
And then I want to go here, and then I want to go there,
There you go.
and then I want to go there. Okay. So Jake's professional narrative was basically, he uncomplicates the complicated. He's talented at reading people and situations. He's got a natural ability to create buy-in, and he gets things done. That is difficult to read in from looking at that resume that we just had. I'm going to hand this off to Barbara. Barbara's going to take us through the nuts and bolts, and then we're going to go back to use the before and after of Jacob to show you how we infused it with the professional narrative, plus all of the best practices that Barbara's going to talk about.
Thanks, Jay. So that's the overview. That's kind of the philosophy and the model we use. And then eventually the rubber hits the road and you have to actually write a resume. Essentially, this is probably going to look very obvious to most everyone. We do pretty much recommend that all of these things be in your resume, and probably most likely, but not always, in this order. When it comes to contact information, we'll start at the top and just go through some best practices, going straight down. Contact really is about, think about Jay's slide about to whom are you communicating and what is it they need to know about you. So you want to, the must-haves are always your name, an email address, a link to your LinkedIn profile, which should sync up or align with your resume, even if it's not identical to it. Some people, sometimes you want to include a phone number, and it's useful to have. Jay and I always love having that so we can get in touch with people. We do use text a lot, and you might want to give some thought to that.
because sometimes emails get caught up in spam. So we'll text, we'll
or
email
also
and
people
spam.
don't have email from work
Yeah.
when we're working with them. A physical address may or may not be important. It depends on, for instance, if you're relocating and you want someone at an organization to know you're not asking them to relocate you, you may want to include a physical address. If you're in certain professions, you may have links to your website. That all should be pretty much in the header. From contact information, we move into why we think a profile summary is a must, and we do. Anytime somebody comes to us with a resume without one, we pretty much add one in. So the reason is because we use this approach of the professional narrative, which allows you to provide some context for the rest of what everyone is going to read on your resume. It's where you get to exercise just a little bit more control over how the reader reads what you have to offer. It's also the case that people hire people. So a profile summary is meant to convey something about you that you're not going to get from just the spec sheet part of your experience, which is going to be there too. And finally, cover letters are not always accepted or read. Sometimes even if they're intended to be read, they get separated. So this is a place where you can cover some of what you would put into a cover letter typically. The basic components are the summary itself, which is generally a narrative in, phrase format. If you're in career transition, we would encourage you to use an objective. That is a controversial discussion. Some people hate them. We like them because, again, it provides context. If you come across a resume and you're looking at a person's background, we, little secret, when we read resumes, we read them from the bottom up. So we look at the background and we're saying, why are they applying? And then we see their objective and it makes sense. Some form of core competencies and skills will likely be included in a profile summary, but not always. Generally, when they are included, they're in some kind of a table format, just honestly to save space. So that's the profile summary. We think that is absolutely foundational to the rest of your resume. I'm going to just digress for a moment and pull the lens back on the structure for a moment and talk about some of the other things that always come up. Jay mentioned multiple versions. It's perfect. Some people ask us whether or not it's okay to use templates. We have no problem with that. They can be helpful. But we do recommend that if you're using one that's kind of trending, try to personalize it, because what you want to do is distinguish yourself. And if you're using a template that everybody else is using, then you're not distinguishing yourself enough. Also be careful of templates that allow you to put so much on one page that it's hard to see, which takes us to the next conversation, which is always about length. How long should my resume be? There is absolutely no agreement or conventional wisdom on this. However, amongst professionals in the industry, we all agree that we know when it's too long. So to Jay's point earlier, have every word be purposeful and don't use anything extraneous. What we don't like to see is when somebody crams everything onto one page in the interest of keeping it to a page, and it makes it hard to read. It's so important when you're doing your resume that it look attractive, and in that way, I mean easy to read.
Accessible to the reader.
I will discuss functional titles because that comes up fairly often in different ways, but I'm going to do that on its own slide in a moment. There are a couple of pitfalls that we do recommend you avoid. Overusing graphics is one. I personally I find it very distracting. Similarly, too much color is also distracting. We are not looking to be entertained. Everybody who's reading your resume just wants to get the information.
And there are templates out there that do a lot of graphics kind of stuff with all sorts of pie charts and everything like that. And it's like,
it's just it's actually harder to read. Use simple fonts that are clear and easy to read. Similarly, and never, 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 never use emojis, period, end of conversation. Do make sure that your resume is in PDF format so that it doesn't jump around, the formatting doesn't jump. And finally, but not least importantly, please proofread your resume and then have somebody else proofread it for you. We actually know people that will not hire people if there's a typo on the resume. You just want to avoid that. I don't subscribe to that theory. I have typos all the time myself. I'm a terrible proofreader, but there are people who do. Looking at language, we always get the question about how do I include all the keywords I need to include? And the answer to that, we'll talk a little bit more on the next slide about the algorithms, but they are a necessary evil. You do need to have them. The good news is that a lot of data is currently coming out saying that the applicant tracking systems, those portals you're putting your resumes into, are not terribly effective. We're hoping that companies will start moving away from them, but they are still here. So you will need to make sure that you get keywords into your resume so you don't get overlooked right from the start. This might look funny. Actions speak louder than words because all we have right now are words. But what I mean by that really is use verbs and nouns whenever possible rather than a lot of descriptors. So you want to convey what you do and what the impact is, which takes us directly to metrics. We do live in a data world. Metrics are the inevitable outcome of having a lot of data. Evidence-based is a word you hear a lot in the ether. Metrics can be either quantitative or qualitative. Many people work in jobs that are entirely qualitative. And the point of them is really to demonstrate impact. Sometimes we see metrics conveyed in a way that's just numbers after numbers, kind of like that spec sheet idea, and that's equally meaningless. So you don't want to overdo it, but you do want to have pay attention to, as you're crafting your resume, using language that does convey impact. This is a little bit of a politically incorrect next bullet point about taking ownership. In the workplace, everyone is accountable for their work, and that's how we're measured. It's just the way it goes. Many, many, many women tend to, and this is surprisingly generationally blind. We have been brought up in a way to use collaborative language. We participate, we collaborate, we assist.
And we men are making inroads, so we men sometimes do the same thing, but it's probably more women.
It is way more women. Actually, I was watching
Good lesson for all of us.
Summit from Abu Dhabi this morning, and Billie Jean King, the world-renowned tennis player, who's also known for having achieved equal pay for women at the US Open decades before her time, truly. She said today, when men read a position description and it has 10 items on it, they say, oh, I can do 5 of those, I'll apply. Women read the same position description, they can do 9, and they say, I don't know, I don't have the 10th. It's kind of like that. That sort of sums up the way that it's just important to take ownership and don't be timid about what you've done. If you've led a project, just say so. Yes, you have other people on it, but you led it. And finally, this is pretty obvious. Conventional wisdom is always write your resume in the third person. Back to the keywords, where we'll expound on that just a little. Application portals or ATS systems are, sort of the norm. They're awful. We hate them. You hate them. You can't beat the algorithms. We get the question, like, how do I get around it? I feel like my application goes into the big black hole. And the answer is you can't beat them. So don't sweat them. Just know that they're there. Do the best you can. They do sometimes use machine learning, typically, but not always. And they are going to look for keywords. The best strategy we can recommend is go to the position description for the job that you're applying to. Look at the words and language in that description, and where and as appropriate, just lift some of those keywords, specifically the ones that are really important, and get them into your resume. And then hopefully you will better your chances of being considered.
It's a living document. And again, who are you gearing it towards? That's why you want to.
It's almost always going to be customized. Probably the biggest chunk, unless you're a very recent grad, of your resume is going to be devoted to your professional experience. and where you're going to showcase what you've done and how you've done it. So there are two basic types. There's a chronological format, which is the one you most often see. That was the one we used, that Jake used when he came to us. And then there's a functional version, which is basically around your skills or areas of expertise rather than your actual experience. You list your experience, but it's just listed at the sort of at the end. And a combined version, which you're going to see in just a moment when Jay shows you the after version of Jake's resume, which kind of integrates both. Those are the three basic types. You can find examples of them online, kind of everywhere. Frequently, we do get these questions. How far back should I go is a big one. Our general rule of thumb is no more than 20 years, probably because what you did 20 years ago, if you've been working that long, doesn't have a lot to do with what you're doing now or what you want to be doing. On occasion, there are always, everything I say, there's an exception to the rule, for sure. If you worked at a really high-powered place, if you're in finance and your first job out was with Goldman for 10 years, and you're now 25 years into your career, you're going to want Goldman on there. So
Even if it's just Goldman Sachs, the years and the title and no description.
without the
need description.
detail. Similar to how far back should I go, kind of a cousin, is what positions do I include? And our advice is include those that are relevant. For many people, each position is relevant to the next. But people who've had transitions or done different types of work can have a lot of different types of positions. You want to account for the time, but you don't want to give the detail about all of them. So you may want to list relevant work experience and then other experience, or work experience and previous experience. It depends on your situation. You do always want to account for any gaps, and those are gaps meaning don't leave gaps in your work experience if you don't have them. Account for that. But more and more frequently, people do have gaps in time. The pandemic, of course, is a great example and that everyone's familiar with. But there's childcare, there's family leave, there's elder care, there are personal pursuits, educational pursuits. There's lots of reasons people have gaps. Just put that time on your resume and just put a note about what you did. We will have a slide on that too, actually. And just one last note, if there are any recent grads here who say, I don't have any good experience, I don't have any internship experience, what we say to do in that case, if you like, I had to work all through college, just put that on your resume, include that. That's always great for people to know. And most people really hold that in high regard. We do on occasion, more often than you might think, recommend that people use a functional title. And what is a functional title? It's a title that we suggest you use that is more descriptive of what you've done or are doing than the title you currently hold. So an example would be, we have a client who uses the word program officer to describe the people in their organization who are actually grant managers. Probably in every other organization, it's a nonprofit. We would recommend that you use grant manager rather than program officer, which can be interpreted to mean many different things. It also could confuse the ATS and not be the right keyword, right?
Or even an HR person.
Or even an HR person.
Or anybody, even a grant manager,
Yes, I
a
mean,
director of grant manager.
a different type of example of an obscure title might be, Jay worked with a candidate who was a vice president of IT. That was his title, but it was a small organization. There was the CTO, there was himself, and there was one person reporting to him. Essentially, his function was senior systems engineer. And if he was going to go into a larger enterprise, which was actually what he wanted to do, that was going to be what his job would be. So we said, take that VP of IT off, because people see that and they immediately say, oh, he's not quite right for this, or we don't need a VP of IT. We want a senior systems engineer. And so you want to keep yourself in the game. This one, I do struggle with some people. Sometimes you say, but I worked hard for that title. And it's like, yes, you did, but it's not going to help you right now. Doesn't mean you weren't, but just change it. Finally, a similar one to the top one, trade development manager. This was with a wine and spirits company. In every other organization, they're brand managers. So just use what fits best and will communicate most
best.
effectively. Accounting for gaps. People say, well, okay, you say to do it, but how? So here are some examples of how. Above the line is a very straightforward one. Someone left LA because his spouse was moving to New York, had accepted a position. He didn't want to do a long-term relationship until he could find a job, so he went with his spouse. The one below the line is a little more complicated, and I just want to illustrate you can account for kind of weird gaps too.
Be creative.
This was somebody I worked with who had accepted a position with Google on a newly formed team. It was a contract role, but an excellent opportunity, placing very senior level people, recruiting senior level people. And it so happened she took the job like in March, and then COVID hit. Google, lo and behold, reneged on all of their outstanding offers for contract employees. She was part of a large cohort who found herself suddenly without a job. I included the link to the New York Times article about that so that it would give that credibility.
We should timestamp this though, because that candidate came into us in like April of 2020.
Right.
Or May of 2020. So she was using it just to say, oh, okay, that's why I'm no longer working at Google.
Correct.
Because I never started there.
Right.
We would do it differently if she was not working for the last 3 years.
Of
right?
course. Absolutely. But it was just a complicated situation. I'm going to get through these pretty quickly because they're fairly straightforward. There's a lot of information on them. These are the next sections that usually will appear on your resume. Typically, your most recent degree in education will appear first. Feel free to drop degree dates anytime you would like to. However, if you're right, in the first few years of school, you probably want to keep them in. I recommend including your major or majors that kind of make you a whole person and say something about you, but I would not include anything else other than potentially really high honors, summa cum laude, Phi Beta Kappa, that kind of thing. Coursework is not necessary. Certifications and licenses, you've worked hard for those typically, make sure to include them all. And there, even if it's not relevant, you might want to include them. One instance would be, I worked with someone who was a clinical social worker. She wanted to transition into the private sector, and get out of therapeutic work, but her degree was probably going to be helpful. It would inform what she would bring to the table. So she left it in there. Skills, we encourage you to put down everything. You never know. Here's maybe an exception to the rule about just what's relevant to this particular job. If you're multilingual, but you're a computer programmer, put in those multi-languages because we work in a multicultural, diverse world. That's helpful. Industry specific knowledge, technical knowledge, all should go in there. On the personal, people ask whether they should include a personal category. I like it. It helps, again, paint a full picture of you. But make sure it's meaningful and relevant. I wouldn't put in something if you're a casual runner, I wouldn't put in running. It's something that somebody might actually want to talk to you about, would be the way I would talk about that. And that's the end of that. Jay, would you like to?
You saved me some time at the end here. Barbara was rambling there at the end. She's going to be exhausted. I'm going to try to get us back to Jake for a second to bring this home. Right? Let's do this again. And Jake's there, right? Becky, nod to me, please. Is this good?
Yes.
Yeah, looks great. Jay.
All right, good. So we chronological resume. Here we are again. He did, great in his heading and contact stuff. He goes through.
Looks good.
Right, all looks good. And we talked about changing. We talked about having his voice come in. We talked about profile. This is Jake afterwards. All right. We wanted to get in the beginning, the professional summary. We wanted to embed his professional narrative and talk about his skills and talk about how he goes about doing things. We also called him now not a hospitality guy, but a program. We didn't call him, but we gave him a title and an objective: program management and operations leader. We talked in these three sentences or little paragraphs about how he goes about doing things. And in here, you will see a lot of the same language having to do with his professional narrative. Then a skills summary. Barbara doesn't like this term. I love it. We try to make the resume idiot proof. We want, so many people are looking at the resume, not that the person's an idiot who's reading it. We want to make it simple to understand. So if you read this top part of the resume, you're going to have a good sense for who Jake is. And then the bottom just validates what we say at the top. It's kind of a combination cover letter and information there. What we did with Jacob is we ended up doing kind of a combination functional and chronological. And to get a sense of functional, if we took all this Marriott information and put it at the end down here and just made it functional, it would be program project management, key accomplishments, internal consulting, business process. We would break those down as his functional abilities. And then at the end, we would just put career history, where he worked. The reason we did it this way is Marriott is a name brand. So we said, okay, that's worthwhile. Let's put Marriott in there, but let's not go too deep into it. Let's get to his functional stuff because he wants to get away from Marriott.
Well, it was also so that we could put the entrepreneurial venture separate.
And then the last thing we did here is we lumped his, rather than put Monkey Joe coming right a year ago, we wanted that to come later on. Let somebody get a good flavor of him. So we have the top part, then we have his history at Marriott, and most people would not notice the gap. But even if they did notice the gap of 4 years, they then get to down here, an entrepreneurial venture. We put it in after the fact. So it's covered, talks about it. And then by the time they get here, this guy looks good. Oh, he did all this at Marriott. Okay. And, oh, this explains what that gap was. Okay, he tried something and it didn't work out, but already they're convinced that this is a guy that they want to hire. All right. So this is kind of the before and after, and you see the structure.
Jake,
Hopefully it's easy to read.
go down to the bottom for a second. So you'll see also at the bottom, we've got his education, and then we've got all of his certifications and his
Tools and
skills.
awards.
I just wanted to make sure that. people
And I
saw.
want to get back here so we can do questions.
We're good.
Oh, we're good. We're good there, right?
We don't need anything. Oops, stop sharing.
No. Okay. All right. Is that good?
Okay, great.
Excellent. All right.
Yeah, I
Thank
think
you,
that's
Barbara.
great. Thank you.
Saved
Thank
me.
you guys so much. It's always so much wonderful information. So again, we'll be sharing out this video. So anybody that wants to revisit some of the great information that has come out today, you'll be getting that sometime tomorrow. And then we have had a few questions come in. So I will kick us off, and I want to remind everybody they can send questions to me directly in the group chat, Becky Picone. So I'm going to start out just by asking this: as headhunters, do you see resumes that you sometimes think are maybe too good to be true? And in this current AI infused world of production, would you, how can you prevent your resume from looking too good to be true, as if it was manufactured like with a computer program?
Oh, like a Chat GPT thing?
Mm-hmm.
We haven't seen those yet. We haven't come across one like that. I have never seen a resume that I thought was too, I've seen a candidate that I thought was too good to be true, meaning, is this candidate really as good as I think they are? And honestly, sometimes they actually are. But I've never seen a resume that I say, this is too good to be true. I've seen a resume that Jay and I would see resumes that we say, oh my gosh, this is fantastic.
But wait,
Yeah.
let's end qualify, and you'll agree with me on this. But good is different than appropriate. Because
Yes.
too good to be true, I can get somebody who's like, oh my God, this guy is the CIO of some technology company, but the job I'm looking for is a director. So this guy is too good. Not too good to be true. He's too good for that job.
Yeah.
Okay.
We would never, if we see somebody who's so right on the money, our hearts go like this. And then the next follow-up is, let me talk to him and see if he or she is real.
Right.
So
Okay.
I wouldn't worry about it being too good. I would worry about it being whether it's appropriate for the job that you're applying for.
Okay.
I've seen some Chat GPT pieces of resumes. And what I will say about them is they read really well at the surface. but when you actually really look at it, they tend to be pretty generic. So that avoid anything that looks very generic. Interesting question.
That's great. Yeah, the follow-up was, do you find that some resume readers do read with like a skeptical lens? Or if it's just they stand out and
I
that's,
mean,
Depends on
maybe-
personality of the reader.
Yeah.
We're more apt to see what we want to do. And I say this, so and maybe I am a glass half full guy.
You
I
are.
mean, I say to people when you interview and you go on an interview, the person across the desk from you wants to hire you.
Mhm.
They don't want to keep looking. They want to fill the job. They want to like you. All right, please come in here and convince me that you're the person that I want to hire. So they are in some regards. Now, I mean, I guess there are negative hiring managers out there who just want to, and hey, look, I've worked with some of them. So they are looking for, let me find a reason to not hire this person. And that's got to be difficult as to work for that person as well. Because
Yeah.
if they're always going to look for the deficiency.
Right.
So I don't, I think it probably depends on the personality, but for the most part,
Yeah,
I don't feel like that's the norm, but
I will look for what stands out and what doesn't make sense. I
Mhm.
will look for what doesn't, when I look at a journey, when I talked about somebody having a journey and I look at what jobs they've taken, generally there's a story underneath that. I will be intuitive to create that. But I will look for things that don't add up, and that's what I'll ask
Mhm.
questions about. But it entails following up. So if you're lazy about interviewing and reaching out, well, then you overlook a lot of good candidates.
right. All right, that's very helpful. Thank you. Another question that we have is, where would you suggest putting patents in the accomplishments section?
I don't know. I don't have one, so I'd put it right in the header, but no, I'm not kidding.
Look what I got.
I would say that probably under personal. I
Mhm.
would probably, you could do it instead of doing skills or what was the other section that I'm blanking on right now? Instead of like a skills section, you could sometimes it makes sense to kind of merge sections together.
Mhm.
I've seen it a lot at the end
At the
when people are in a role that's, even if they're in an software engineering role,
Scientific.
as opposed to even more mechanical or electrical, a lot of times they will reference. And what you want to do is, what you can do is in that profile summary on the top, you can reference successful patents.
Right. and
All
then
right,
list
have
it.
gotten successful patents for several products, and then let them look at the bottom for more details if you want to have the details. So that's where that profile summary
Or-
comes in important, just a quick reference to it, and then they can dig a little bit deeper.
Or you can hyperlink to it. You can also, one thing I just want to comment is that sometimes the very last thing on a resume it actually gets read too or noticed. So sometimes putting something right at the bottom can have it stand out more. It's just a thought.
Okay. Yeah, that makes great sense. Thank you for those. And so here's another question that we have them. They're all coming in now. When considering changing a job title to better match responsibilities, how would someone with limited industry experience or know-how find out what a better and more functional job title would be?
Well, if you're looking for jobs, what are the titles of the jobs you're looking for? So go online, like if do a preliminary job search and see what the jobs are called
Mhm.
that look interesting or appropriate for you. And I would and then maybe, see if you can connect with some people in that industry, other people in the industry who are more experienced, and ask if they know what it would be called elsewhere. I mean, probably they do.
Mhm.
We sometimes will conduct searches and we're not sure of what an appropriate title is to find a lot of people doing it. So we have to wade through until we find all of a sudden, oh, this is what
This
they
is
call
what they
these
call
people.
these people.
But if it's true, if you look at specific jobs, what the requirements are, all right, not the requirements, I'm sorry, the job description. If you see a job description, you say, oh, that's me, that's what I want to do. Well, then look at the title and see if it's appropriate.
Okay. All right, that's great. Thank you, and thank you for that question. So I have another person that has recently asked, Mike, I'm curious if Barbara and Jay have experience with developing resumes for the federal government. It seems like it's a very different hiring process than for the private sector.
I've seen resumes of people who work in federal government, and I've helped them refine them, but I've never developed one for someone who wants to get into the federal government coming from the private sector, which I think is very specific. And the application process similarly is also very specific. So I'm hesitant to comment on that.
Yeah, short of it, and it depends on what type of role within the federal government, because I think some are not as clearly defined as others. There's federal government, sometimes when I see people who come out of government with government resumes, they're somewhere in between a resume and a CV. So because of the level of detail and classifications and stuff like that you might have. So it depends if it's something that's security related, or if it's federal government, you're working for the US Postal Service, then I don't think that it changes from what we're describing here. I don't think there's any difference, but
I'm thinking about, I just about a year ago, not even, I worked with a candidate who had been he was a nuclear submarine guy. Really interesting background, had spent many years in the government, but he had already transitioned out of government. So for one job, so his resume looked like a private citizen, but he did reference it, and there was information included, but going in reverse is how I'm not quite sure. Oh, somebody just put something
I've
in
seen
the
a lot.
chat.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people who come out of city government, and the resumes are fairly conventional. They're not that much different than a regular resume.
Yeah, but that's
But I
not
don't know
federal.
federal,
Yeah,
you know,
federal's different.
same thing with state. I've seen people out of state government. So federal's maybe a different animal that we can't really speak to.
Especially regarding security clearances.
Uh-huh.
So Becky.
Okay,
we-
yeah,
If we don't know something, we'll say it.
Okay.
You notice that?
that's why we love you
No,
guys. Yeah.
We got stumped, man. We don't get stumped very often.
That's great. So, yes, and that could hopefully, could be a good topic for Friday too, or, at some point with follow up or more details related to that question. We did have somebody that has asked how it's best to add in, and I guess this is similar to the Pantons, but if you have advanced training courses, how could you capture those on resumes?
Right in the
Education.
certifications, licensing, and skills. So I don't often put those in exactly with education. I usually put them in more with skills, but you can, depending on what it is.
Unless, this is why there's always an unless,
There's always an
unless you're
exception.
transitioning to something totally different. So if all of a sudden you're getting specific training because you want to do a career change,
Right.
Mhm.
again, profile summary on the top, talking about why you'd be good in this new career that you're going to.
Mhm.
Then you want to talk about maybe a functional resume of what you have, the various skills and experience that you bring with you to the new job. And also those certifications can go in there. So you have the training, maybe even before that. What we like to say is, especially when you're transitioning, you always want your resume to be 80% the direction you're going and 20% of where you've been.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's just a promotion of sorts or a modest move. Sometimes it's more radical. Jake is a good example. It's a little more radical, not super radical. It's not like he decided that he wanted to become a sommelier, or something like that, where he all of a sudden talked about his interest in wine and working with people and had certifications from and became
Yeah.
whatever, second level, third level, and then talked about it. That's where you might want to put your certifications closer to the front.
Okay, that's very helpful because the second, there was a follow-up question to that about how to talk about your career before a big transition, as this person is a mechanical engineer and looking for work that is not engineering work. So how to kind of capture that.
And if this person looked at the last seminar, we talked about looking at your your transition skills, your transitional skills,
Transferable knowledge.
transferable knowledge. Thank you. Transferable knowledge and what you can take to that new. And it's a combination of your journey and your traits, your personal formula plus your journey,
Mhm.
and then transferable skills inform a different type of professional narrative. And that's the 80% you want to put forward, leaving engineering. Because with engineering, you obviously are a problem solver. You're detailed, you're probably quantitative, what have you.
Mhm. Okay, that's great.
And I go on to-
Yeah, thank you. And great, yep, plug for last week's too. Again, you can find on our site and on the Professional Power Up link with all of the upcoming events, you'll see a link to last week's video too, if you want to watch that video. And then Michelle just put a link in for next week's video or next week's program as well, which is the or I'm sorry, she put in a link for this Friday, the Job Talk Ask Us Anything style program that we have where you can ask any other follow-up questions or additional questions you have about resumes. I think we have time for one more question here. This person says they've talked to other career coaches who've said that the resume should be focused on what you can do for someone and you want to arouse their curiosity, and just what your thoughts are on that and how, you know, if you agree with it, which it sounds like you do.
Totally aligns with our theory of to whom and, you know, what you bring to the table, right? So, and conveying impact, but it's really, you know, why you, right? Why should we hire Becky rather than, you know, Michelle, for instance? And what does Becky have, right, that I might want? So you're really always, everything about a job search is conveying what you can do for the other person, right? Because that's why you get hired. You get paid to do something for them. They're not paying you to do something for yourself. Now, hopefully you're doing something for yourself at the same time and you get something out of it other than just a paycheck. But
yeah, we think the professional narrative handles that. You're essentially talking about what you can bring to that organization. That's everything. When you're interviewing also, we will talk about making the case. We did that also with transitions. When you're going in there, you have to be prepared to say how you will be an asset to that organization. And a resume is touching on that and teasing that. And then when you interview, you want to do enough research, you can really apply it personally to the organization itself.
it's also why we do recommend typically that there will be multiple resumes. So if you're applying and you may have one basic resume, but you just tweak it a lot so that you can say what you're going to bring to this particular position. What is it about your background that aligns well or stands out potentially from other people that will have you be able to make a contribution? That question could have a lot of different answers, but by and large, we're in complete agreement that that's kind of what you're doing.
Did the person say mystery or interest? Create interest or mystery?
No, interest.
And then we think that's why we talk about the languaging too. It's I want to have a conversation with this person. I want to have a conversation with this background.
Right.
That's what we try to engender.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Thanks. As usual, the time has gone so quickly. We so appreciate you sharing all of that. And I'm really looking forward to Friday's program too, the Job Talks. We had so many great questions come in. It'll be good to keep the conversation going on Friday. Again, Michelle did put in links to Friday's program as well as next Wednesday's program, Kissing Frogs, conducting a job.
Michelle, did you share our email addresses, by the way? If people want to reach out to us?
I will right now.
Okay, thanks,
Thank
sweet.
you.
Bye.
Okay, so look for those, and we will be sending a follow-up email to this program. You should be getting that sometime like later tomorrow. That'll have a link to the video for today's event, as well as a link to the personal job coaching, like a little bit of a plug for Jay and Barbara have entered or offered up some slots to be able to meet with people individually where you can talk
Office hours.
Office hours. I'm sorry, I struggled with pulling that out. But so the link for that for everybody who has attended will be in the email as well. And if you have any questions, you can always contact us. Again, I'm Becky Picone and Michelle Cavalcanti in Alumni Relations. And other than that, I'll stay on for another extra minute so that you can grab those links from the chat if you'd like, but the links will also be shared in tomorrow's email. So I just want to thank everybody again for sharing your lunch hour with us, and thank Jay and Barbara. And we're really excited to see you on Friday.
Thank you. We are too. And we'll be able to drill down a little more on Friday into some of the questions. We'll have more time.
Okay,
I
great.
look forward to that.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Good week.
Thanks.